With 4D V18, you have more ways to create a beautiful data-driven documents. There are new ways to print out documents, as well as generating PDF. There are new ways to create Office documents. There are even new ways to send emails. But first, let's talk about printing. For many years, 4D had 3 commands for printing. A print record is used to print a single record using a detail form. A print selection is used to print a selection of records using a list form. A print label is also used to print a selection of records, but in a matrix layout. In more recent years, the commands print form and print object were added. And instead of using a single form for printing, these newer commands allow you to combine several forms for printing. In any case, printing in 4D is based on forms. As of V17, instead of passing the name of a form, you can also pass an object that defines a form. Or you can pass a resource path of a JSON file that defines a form. And several existing commands have been extended to accept this new syntax. With all of that in mind, please watch the following demo. So here we have a database of groceries. The idea is to print these records with style. Now, as you can see, I'm using a form called Portrait A4 and another one called Single. They're both project forms. They're actually JSON forms, which means there's a JSON file on disk, and I can open it using Atom, which is a generic code editor. Now, if you browse through the JSON content, you recognize some familiar form properties: page format, page objects, as well as some new ones like CSS, which is specific to project mode. If you go back to the method, so since both of these forms are actually JSON objects, I can put them in object variables. Now the idea is to combine these two forms, which are objects, to create a dynamic layout. So I'm going to use the larger one as the base and then duplicate the smaller one for my printout. So I'm going to run the method, and here I've got 4 records in 4 little boxes. Now the line of code that did the actual printing is this one, so I'm going to multiply them into 3 lines, and now I've got more records on my result. Now I'm going to duplicate or multiply the codes even more and see what happens. So here we've got a page break, and on the second page I've got 3 records, and that is because if you look at the selection, Shiitake was the last record in my selection. Now as you can see, I'm using the same object $form over and over again. So it's very object oriented, a very modern way of coding. Now this other example is basically the same, but line 6 is a long line. I've chained all the object notation into one line. So the result is basically the same, but I've done it with fewer lines of code. So the next example, I'm using the same portrait form, the single form, and the new one, 2 times horizontal, which is a rectangular form that consumes double the size of the square form, and another one vertical, which is slightly different, and 4 times logo is a large square with the Summit logo. So the idea is to combine all these different forms into on top of the Portrait A4 base form. I'm going to run the code, and here I've got a nice looking dynamic layout with the logo and a catalogue really with small and large blocks. So I'm going to go to the last example there, which is basically the same. The only difference is that the logo form is not used this time. I'm going to run the form. Again, I've got a dynamic output, but without the logo. So let's recap what just happened there. A JSON form is an object that represents a form. In binary mode, you can create this object with the command form convert to dynamic. Or you can pass the content of a JSON form, JSON file, which works in project mode as well. JSON pass. Okay? Or you could just create the object from scratch. Now, a JSON form is just a regular object. You can add or remove form objects using object notation. Likewise, you can move or resize these objects or change their values. You just pass that object to a printing command that supports JSON forms, and this technique allows you to generate complex printout documents on the fly. Now let's move on to creating PDF. Please watch the following demo. So here we have a 4D View Pro invoice document. Now the idea is to convert this to PDF. Now, one way to do it would be to invoke a print action, since printing to PDF is supported on both platforms. So how would I do that? Well, first, I'd create a print info object, which allows me to set the orientation, the watermark, and some footer expressions if I like. And then I call VP print. Now this VP print command actually invokes a JavaScript print command because View Pro is actually a web area. And because it's a JavaScript print command, View Pro area would automatically prompt a print settings dialog. Well, here I'm going to run the method by clicking there. And as you can see, we've got the print settings dialog. But the important thing for this demo is to open in preview. So the PDF is generated, we've got the watermark, we've got the footer expression. So that's how you would use the print feature to generate PDF. Now, remember how you can export a View Pro document to Excel. Now first you would define the file path statement XLSX is the path, and you would also use an option object. Now that option object would contain a formula which should be invoked once the export process is complete. And the command is VP export document. So I'm going to run the code, click, and there an email is created, and the attachment is an Excel rendition of the View Pro invoice document. So that's how you would normally export from View Pro. Now exporting to PDF is kind of like a mix of the two demos we just saw. So first I would need to create a print info object, to set the orientation, the watermark, and the footer expression. And I'm also, of course, this time we're going to export to PDF, so the file name is different. And we need an option object which contains a formula that should be invoked when VP export document is complete. So when I run the code, it's running. An email is created, but this time the attachment is a PDF file. See, unlike the previous example, there was no printing involved because the PDF was created directly from View Pro. So there are two different ways in View Pro to generate PDF. One is to use the export feature. The PDF is created directly by code and you have more control. The other way is to use the print feature. Now this is an interactive feature of the area, so you would have less control over it, but it's a useful feature, especially if that's what the end user wants. Now let's move on to working with Office documents. Office documents are actually zip files with a different file extension. For instance, if you change the extension of an Excel spreadsheet to zip and then open it, you should get a folder. And inside that folder are some files and more folders which themselves contain files and folders. Now, the interesting about these files is that they're basically all XML. And as you know, 4D is very well capable of manipulating XML. So, in theory, if you can modify these files and zip the root folder and then change the extension back to XLSX, you should get a new Excel spreadsheet. To see this in action, please watch the following demo. So here, $invoice is an object which contains a property named a folder, which is a folder object based on a folder that exists. If I jump to the actual folder, you would see that it's actually an unzipped version of an Excel spreadsheet. So going back to the method, I create $file, which is a file object, which does not exist yet. Now when I zip the invoice folder, a new Excel file, which is actually a zip file, is created. If I open it with Excel, you would see that it is a viable spreadsheet. All the rows are empty, but that's okay. Now this time I'm going to add some item data to this invoice. So we're going to go into the block that we skipped earlier to add item data. Apple, lemon, banana, and so on. Now when I generate the invoice again and open it with Excel, I see that I've now got some data, invoice data. And you can see that certain cells are cross-referencing each other, which is what you want. And finally, to complete the invoice, I'm going to set the I'm going to go scroll a little bit. So I'm going to set the item, of course, and also set the tagline for my company. So there, I'm setting the tagline. That's my invoice number, discount rate, and so on. I'm going to generate the invoice and open with Excel. So now I've got that. I see that the billing information is filled. I've got the invoice number. All the data is there. Good. And even the credit and discount information is taking into account the specificities for this order. So let's recap what just happened there. An Excel spreadsheet is really just a zip file. First, you create a file object in order to read archive contents. And once you have an archive object, you can export its contents using the copy to method. And the reverse is a similar process. So first, you would create a file object which represents the expected destination. So this object does not exist yet. The file does not exist yet. And next, you pass the folder you want to zip and the file object you created earlier to the command zip create archive. And that's it. Now let's move on to some more Office related stuff. Please watch the following demo. So here I have a Write Pro document using a specific font and background color. And thanks to new style sheet commands, I can switch them by switching style sheets. And if I export to Word, you see that the style sheet has been exported. So my next demo is another Write Pro document. And this one has several pages. Now the document does not have a header or a footer, but as of V18 there are commands to manage headers and footers by code. So I've just created a new header. So it's a header. And if I export to Word, you see that the header is also exported, as one would expect. So next demo. Right. So here I have several pages. The margin on both sides are equal width. Now as of V18 there are commands to manage the first page as well as even and odd pages. So now the margins are different for each subsection. And when I export to Word, the different margin for even odd pages are properly exported. So let's just recap what just happened there. A style sheet in Write Pro is an object that represents a CSS class. So this is an object, and you can use WP set attributes on this object to set the background color for this class. You can use the same command to set the font for this class. Now, to create a header in Write Pro, so now we're going on to headers, you need to first specify the target section. So here, I've decided to target section 1. And I'm going to create a header, new header. Now, if a header already exists, you should use WP get header. Now, by default, the header height is relative, but if you like, you can define an absolute height instead by disabling automatic height. See? Now, to manage even and odd pages in Write Pro, you first need to specify the target section. So again, I'm going to target section 1. For instance, you might want to create a first page subsection, or maybe a left page subsection. Now, once you have a subsection object, you can set its attributes such as the left margin. A right page subsection is automatically created when a left page subsection is created. You can't have just the one, so there's no need to create it. Get subsection is the command. And again, you can use WP set attributes on this object to change its attributes. docx is a complex specification, and Write Pro has certain features that are not supported by Word. That said, the export feature is designed to preserve all compatible features such as headers, footers, settings, bookmarks, etc., so that the result looks as close to the original as possible. Now let's move on to sending emails. As with V18, we have two ways of sending emails in 4D. One is to use the new SMTP transporter object. The other is to use internet commands. The plugin continues to work, which is a good thing, but the new way has so many advantages. It is object-based, it is thread-safe, it creates a detailed log file, and so on. And given all of that, you might want to reassess your feelings towards using internet commands. No? To see what I mean, please watch the following demo. Here, I have a set of HTML templates that I downloaded from the internet. This design includes nice images and they all look professional. The layout is modern, responsive, and mobile aware. Now I can convert the HTML to MIME in order to use them as my marketing emails. The body looks okay, but we have a few problems. For one thing, the title is hard-coded, and also there's no sender or recipient, and also the subject is missing. Well, that's kind of expected since the email body was just an HTML template that I saved on disk. It's just a template. So here is what I do. First, I create a new mail object by passing the MIME. The attachments property, which is a collection, contains all the images. And several levels down the body values property, we see the actual email body in HTML. To define the from address for this email, I simply add a from property. From. And I do the same for the subject and also the to address. I can even use process 4D tags to process the embedded tags in my HTML to dynamically set the title. So this time the subject is customized. I have a title and all the necessary email headers such as sender, recipient, and subject have been filled. And just to illustrate how easy it is to customize this email, I'm going to apply an SVG filter on all the embedded images. Processing. So now all the images look blue. To repeat the same thing, I'm going to use a different filter, monochrome. Processing, and now all the images are black and white. So let's just let's recap what just happened there. To send an HTML email, you just create a new object and assign the HTML source to its property HTML body. A mail object can be sent with the send method of an SMTP transporter object. And when a person receives an HTML email, what they actually get is MIME. And the mail convert from MIME command allows you to create a new mail object based on this MIME. The HTML body of this email can be found in its HTML body property. You can change the body directly or process it with a command such as process 4D tags. Likewise, you can change the subject or the to address using object notation. When you are done updating the mail object, you can convert it back to MIME. MIME is plain text, which means you can store it in a text field. Or, if you like, you can save it on disk. Or, if you, say, want to send this email in the background process, you can pass the MIME to a worker. And the worker will convert the MIME to a mail object and send it using an SMTP transporter. The new way of coding is totally object-based, completely thread-safe and really efficient.